Have you ever wondered what truly happens behind the scenes of your favorite restaurant? What if the smiling staff serving you a delicious meal are hiding a very different face in the kitchen? This is the story of a restaurant owner who refused to sit back as complaints about his staff began to mount, and the lengths he went to uncover the truth will surprise you. In the heart of the city stood a restaurant that had earned a reputation for its mouth-watering dishes and cozy ambience. Customers flocked there, not just for the food but for the experience. It was the pride and joy of its owner, the man who had built it from scratch with a vision of creating a place where people felt welcome, cared for, and valued. But as the restaurant grew busier, whispers of discontent began to emerge. Customers started leaving reviews about rude waiters, inattentive service, and even hostility toward junior staff. Loyal patrons began to dwindle, and the once bright reputation of the restaurant dimmed. For the owner, these complaints weren't just a blow to his business, they were personal. Every dish, every detail of the restaurant had his heart in it, and seeing his dream unravel was unbearable. But here's where things take a twist. Instead of sitting in his office and barking orders to fix the problem, the owner decided to do something radical. He wanted the unfiltered truth, and he knew the only way to get it was by stepping into the shoes of the people who saw it all: the dishwashers. So, how does a successful restaurant owner go undercover in his own business? What did he discover? And how did his bold decision change the lives of everyone involved? Stay with us until the end of this story, because the way it all unfolds is nothing short of inspiring, and the lesson it leaves behind might just change how you think about leadership and accountability forever. Shall we dive in? The first sign of trouble came quietly, like a faint whisper in the background. A few negative reviews began popping up online, small complaints about wait times or a server forgetting an order. At first, the owner brushed them off. After all, every restaurant had its off days, right? But as weeks turned into months, the complaints grew louder and more specific. "I felt invisible," wrote one customer, describing how a server barely acknowledged their presence. Another said, "The food was amazing, but the staff made me feel unwelcome. I'm not coming back." These weren't isolated incidents anymore. They were a pattern. The breaking point came when a loyal patron, someone who had been dining there for years, sent a heartfelt email. She shared how a simple dinner with her family turned sour because of the staff's rude behavior. "It wasn't just bad service," she wrote. "It was outright disrespect. This isn't the restaurant I fell in love with." The owner couldn't ignore it any longer. He started asking around, discreetly talking to regulars and even some employees. What he discovered shocked him. Stories of staff snapping at each other, rolling their eyes at customers, and creating a tense, toxic environment were all too common. Even worse, it seemed that those in higher positions were treating junior staff poorly, and no one dared to speak up. It was a gut punch. How had this happened under his watch? He had always prided himself on creating a workplace where people could thrive, but somewhere along the way, things had gone terribly wrong. Determined to get to the root of the problem, the owner realized he needed to see it for himself. But how could he uncover the truth when everyone knew who he was? He couldn't just walk into the kitchen and expect people to behave naturally. That's when the idea hit him, a bold, almost absurd plan that might just work. The owner decided to trade his tailored suits for a pair of worn-out overalls. He would become the newest dishwasher in his own restaurant. Little did the staff know, their newest recruit wasn't just there to scrub plates, he was there to scrub out the rot threatening his beloved business. The stage was set, and the owner was ready to embark on this undercover mission. But what would he uncover? And how would he confront the truth once he found it? The answers lay ahead, in a journey that would test his resolve, his leadership, and the very heart of his restaurant. Ready to find out what happens next? Let's continue. The idea was daring, almost reckless, but the owner couldn't shake it. If he wanted to truly understand what was going wrong, he needed to experience the restaurant from the bottom up. The dishwasher role was perfect. It was one of the least glamorous positions, often overlooked and underappreciated, yet it offered a front row seat to the kitchen's dynamics. The plan began with a little preparation. He scoured thrift stores for second-hand clothes, settling on a faded shirt, baggy jeans, and a pair of scuffed shoes that had seen better days. He left behind his expensive watch and carefully styled hair, replacing them with a rugged and kempt look. The goal was simple: to blend in so seamlessly that no one would suspect a thing. Next, he created a backstory. He was Dave, a man down on his luck, looking for any job to make ends meet. It wasn't far from the truth. Many dishwashers were hardworking individuals doing their best to get by, and he wanted to honor that reality. The big day arrived, and the owner stepped into his own restaurant not as the boss, but as a new hire. He was greeted by the kitchen manager, who barely glanced at him before pointing toward the dish pit. "You're on sinks," the manager barked, and just like that, he was thrown into the fray. The kitchen was a whirlwind of noise and motion, chefs barking orders, servers rushing in and out, and dish after dish piling up in the sink. The owner rolled up his sleeves and got to work, scrubbing plates and stacking them neatly. At first, it felt awkward, but as the hours passed, he began to settle into the rhythm. What struck him almost immediately was how invisible he felt. The staff barely acknowledged his presence, treating him like part of the equipment rather than a person. But that was exactly what he wanted: an unfiltered view of the kitchen's inner workings. Over the next few hours, he quietly observed. The chefs seemed competent, focused on their craft, but there was an edge to their tone, especially when speaking to lower-ranking staff. The servers, who were all smiles in the dining area, let their masks slip once they stepped into the kitchen. He heard snide comments, so impatient gestures, and even witnessed one server berating a fellow employee for a mistake. It was only his first day, but the cracks were already starting to show. The owner realized that his plan might uncover more than he had bargained for. What other truths would the coming days reveal, and how far would he need to go to turn things around? Stay tuned, because the story is just getting started. The first day in the dish pit was a revelation. As the owner, now Dave, stood hunched over the sink, warm water splashing onto his arms, he realized just how grueling the work was. Dish after dish came at him, covered in sauces, crumbs, and grease. The heat of the kitchen was oppressive, and the clanging of pots and pans created a constant, almost deafening noise. But the physical toll wasn't the only thing that struck him. It was the way people interacted or didn't. The staff seemed to operate in silos, each person focused solely on their own tasks. There was little camaraderie, and even less kindness. The kitchen manager, who was supposed to be leading the team, barely acknowledged Dave's existence. Instead, he barked orders like a drill sergeant, his tone curt and condescending. "Faster, dishwasher, those plates won't clean themselves," he snapped at one point, without so much as a glance in Dave's direction. The waitstaff were no better. Between shifts in the dining area, they stormed into the kitchen with a different energy entirely. Gone were the pleasant smiles and polite tones they reserved for customers. Instead, they spoke sharply, sometimes rudely, to the kitchen team. "This order is taking forever," one server yelled, slamming a plate onto the counter. The tension was palpable. What stood out most, though, was how the other dishwashers were treated. They were at the bottom of the hierarchy, invisible and unappreciated. One young man, barely out of his teens, was scolded for being too slow when he was clearly overwhelmed. No one offered to help him, and he worked silently, his head down. The owner felt a surge of anger and guilt. These were the people who kept his restaurant running, the ones who cleaned up after everyone else, who worked tirelessly in the background, and yet they were treated like they didn't matter. As the day went on, the owner started to notice patterns. The same employees who were rude to the dishwashers were often the ones who slacked off or cut corners. They acted entitled, as if they were above the rest of the team. Meanwhile, the hard-working staff, the ones who showed up early and stayed late, were ignored or, worse, ridiculed. By the end of his shift, the owner's hands were pruny, his back ached, and his heart was heavy. He had only scratched the surface, but it was clear that something was deeply wrong. The culture in his restaurant had turned toxic, and if he didn't intervene soon, it might collapse altogether. As he walked home that night, still dressed as Dave, the owner made a promise to himself. He would dig deeper, observe more, and gather the evidence he needed. And when the time came, he would act decisively, not just for the sake of his restaurant, but for the people who truly deserve better. What would he uncover in the days ahead? And how would his staff react when the truth came to light? The answers were just around the corner. Keep watching, because this story is far from over. By the second day, the owner, still disguised as Dave, had a clearer picture of who the culprits were. The kitchen was a microcosm of power dynamics, and certain staff members stood out for all the wrong reasons. Take Lisa, one of the senior servers. She was charismatic with the customers, earning big tips and compliments at the tables. But once she stepped into the kitchen, her demeanor shifted entirely. She treated the kitchen staff like personal servants, barking orders with no regard for their workload. "This needs to be done now. I don't care how busy you are," she snapped at one of the line cooks, tossing an order slip onto the counter. Then there was Mark, the kitchen manager. He was supposed to be the backbone of the operation, but instead, he was a source of the tension. Mark had a habit of yelling at everyone. He criticized the dishwashers for being too slow, the line cooks for making minor mistakes, and even the servers when orders got delayed. His tone was sharp and cutting, leaving little room for respect. One incident in particular stood out. A young server, clearly nervous, had forgotten to include a special request on a customer's order. Instead of calmly addressing the mistake, Mark exploded. "Are you kidding me? Do you even know how to do your job?" he shouted, loud enough for everyone in the kitchen to hear. The server, red-faced and teary-eyed, mumbled an apology and hurried out. The owner's heart sank. This wasn't just unprofessional behavior, it was toxic. It was no wonder complaints were piling up if this was how the staff treated each other. But what infuriated him most was how the rude employees treated the dishwashers. They were the easiest targets, with no power to push back. Lisa rolled her eyes when dishes weren't cleaned fast enough, muttering, useless." Mark dumped greasy pans into the sink without a word, leaving the dishwashers to figure out how to manage the mess. Even worse, the rude employees seemed to have formed a clique. They covered for each other's mistakes, gossiped about other staff members, and created an atmosphere of fear and division. The owner couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between these employees and the hardworking ones who quietly kept the restaurant running. There was Carlos, a dishwasher who worked tirelessly without complaint, and Mia, a line cook who went out of her way to help her teammates whenever she could. These were the people who deserved recognition, not ridicule. As the shift ended, the owner felt a mix of anger and determination. He now had a clearer picture of the problem. A small group of employees had poisoned the workplace culture, and their behavior was dragging down the entire team. But knowing the problem was only half the battle. How could he address it without alienating the good employees? And how could he make sure the restaurant didn't slip back into the same toxic patterns? One thing was certain: he needed more evidence, and he was willing to stay undercover as long as it took to gather it. The rude employees had no idea their days were numbered, but their reckoning was coming. The next chapter of this story would be one of confrontation, accountability, and change. Don't go anywhere, because the most dramatic moments are yet to come. Amid the tension and toxicity, there were glimmers of hope, small acts of kindness that reminded the owner why he had built the restaurant in the first place. As Dave, he began to notice the unsung heroes of the kitchen, the ones who kept the place afloat with their hard work and compassion. Carlos, the dishwasher who had been there the longest, stood out immediately. Despite being overworked and underappreciated, Carlos always had a kind word for everyone. "Hey man, let me show you an easier way to stack those," he said to Dave one day, taking a few moments to help him organize the endless pile of plates. His smile never wavered, even when the rude staff dumped more work on him. Then there was Mia, the line cook. While Mark barked orders and Lisa made demands, Mia quietly stepped in to fill the gaps. She helped servers when their trays were overloaded, stayed late to assist the dishwashers, and never once complained about the chaos around her. "We're all in this together," she said one night, handing Dave a cup of water after noticing how exhausted he looked. Even among the junior servers, there were a few bright spots. Sarah, a newer hire, was always polite and quick to apologize when things went wrong. One evening, after witnessing Lisa snap at Dave for a delay in cleaning glasses, Sarah came over and said softly, "Don't let her get to you. You're doing great." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world in that moment. The owner also noticed how these kind employees treated customers. While others like Lisa were dismissive or impatient, people like Mia and Sarah went out of their way to ensure diners had a positive experience. They listened, smiled genuinely, and handled complaints with grace. It was clear that these were the people who truly embodied the values he had envisioned for his restaurant. But kindness didn't come without its challenges. The hardworking staff were often overshadowed by the louder, more aggressive employees. They bore the brunt of extra work, picked up slack, and rarely received credit. Watching this unfold, the owner felt both admiration for their resilience and anger at the unfairness of it all. It became clear to him that these were the people he needed to protect and uplift. They were the heart of his restaurant, the ones who truly cared about the team and the customers. If he was going to make changes, it wasn't just about firing the rude staff, it was about rewarding and empowering the ones who had been holding everything together. As he scrubbed plates alongside Carlos that evening, the owner made another silent vow. He wouldn't just fix the problems in his restaurant, he would create an environment where people like Carlos, Mia, and Sarah could thrive. The days ahead would bring confrontation and tough decisions, but for the first time in a while, the owner felt hopeful. The kindness he had witnessed reminded him of the soul of his business, and he was determined to bring it back to life. What happens when the owner finally reveals who he really is? How will the good employees react? And what will become of the toxic ones? The answers are just around the corner. Stick with us as the story unfolds. The moment that changed everything came on a particularly busy Friday night. The restaurant was packed, orders were flying in, and the kitchen was in overdrive. Plates clattered, voices rose, and the air was thick with tension. But it wasn't just the usual chaos of a dinner rush, it was the way people were treating each other that made the atmosphere unbearable. Lisa was in rare form, storming into the kitchen every few minutes with complaints. "This steak is overcooked. Are you guys even trying tonight?" she snapped, slamming the plate onto the counter. Mark, instead of diffusing the situation, only added fuel to the fire. "I don't care who's overwhelmed, get it together," he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. The owner, still undercover as Dave, was at the sink, scrubbing furiously to keep up with the endless flow of dirty dishes. He had been holding back his frustration for days, but tonight, it was almost impossible to stay quiet. He could see Carlos, exhausted and sweating, struggling to keep up. Mia was working double time, trying to cover for everyone's mistakes. Then it happened. A junior server, barely 18 and new to the job, accidentally spilled a tray of drinks near the kitchen door. The sound of shattering glass silenced the room for a moment, and all eyes turned to her. She froze, panicked, her face turning red as she scrambled to clean up the mess. Lisa's reaction was immediate and brutal. "Are you kidding me?" she yelled. "Do you even know what you're doing? This isn't daycare." Her voice was loud enough for the entire kitchen to hear, and the young server looked like she might burst into tears. Mark joined in, shaking his head in disgust. "Clean it up and stay out of the way. You're just slowing everyone down." The owner felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. He couldn't take it anymore. He stepped away from the sink, his hands still wet, and approached the scene. He wanted to say something, to stop the humiliation, but he held back. This wasn't the moment to reveal himself, not yet. Instead, he crouched down to help the server pick up the pieces of broken glass, whispering, "It's okay. Don't let them get to you." The rest of the shift was a blur. The owner worked silently, observing the way Lisa and Mark continued to berate others while doing little to help themselves. He watched as Carlos stayed late to finish cleaning, as Mia covered yet another shift without complaint, and as the young server quietly left, her head down. Default text be the time the night was over. The owner's mind was made up. He couldn't wait any longer. The toxic behavior was destroying his team, and if he didn't step in now, the damage might be irreversible. Tomorrow, everything would change. The rude employees would finally face the consequences of their actions, and the hard-working staff would get the recognition they deserved. The breaking point had arrived, and it was time to take action. What would the owner's confrontation look like? How would the staff react when they realized who Dave really was? Stay with us, because the most dramatic chapter is just about to begin. The following morning, the owner walked into his restaurant with a renewed sense of purpose. But this time, he wasn't dressed as Dave the dishwasher. He had traded his scruffy clothes for a sharp suit and carried himself with the authority of the man who had built the business from the ground up. Today wasn't just another day, it was the day the truth would come out. The staff were already gathered in the dining area for their pre-shift meeting, chatting casually, unaware of what was about to unfold. Lisa was seated near the front, scrolling on her phone, while Mark leaned against a wall with a smug expression. Carlos, Mia, and a few other hard-working employees sat quietly, waiting for instructions. When the owner entered, the room fell silent. The employees exchanged confused glances, clearly surprised to see him there. After all, it wasn't often that the boss showed up for a team meeting. "Good morning, everyone," the owner began, his voice calm but firm. "Before we start today's shift, I need to address something important." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. For the past week, He continued, "I've been working here undercover. You all know me as Dave, the dishwasher." He gestured toward the kitchen, where he had spent long hours scrubbing plates and observing the dynamics. Gasps rippled through the room, and a few people exchanged nervous looks. Lisa's face turned pale, and Mark's confident smirk faltered. "I wanted to see what really happens when I'm not around," the owner said, his tone steady but with an edge of disappointment. "And what I saw was both eye-opening and heartbreaking." He turned his gaze toward Lisa and Mark. "I saw behavior that isn't acceptable in any workplace, let alone one built on respect and teamwork. Yelling at your colleagues, belittling people, and creating a toxic environment is not just unprofessional. It's harmful. It's not who we are, and it's not what this restaurant stands for." The tension in the room was palpable. Lisa looked down, avoiding eye contact, while Mark shifted uncomfortably. "But I also saw something else," the owner continued, his tone softening as he looked at Carlos, Mia, and others. "I saw incredible dedication and kindness. I saw people going above and beyond, even when they weren't being treated fairly. To those of you who have worked hard and treated others with respect, you are the reason this restaurant is still standing, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart." He paused again, letting his words sink in before delivering the final blow. "Effective immediately, there will be changes. Those who have contributed to the toxic environment will no longer be a part of this team." His eyes lingered on Lisa and Mark, making it clear who he meant. "For the rest of you, I promise to create a workplace where you feel valued, supported, and respected." The room was silent for a moment before Carlos spoke up, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you," he said simply, and the rest of the team nodded in agreement. The owner's words had landed. The rude employees would be dealt with, and the good ones would finally get the recognition they deserved. But the story wasn't over yet. There was still work to be done to rebuild the team and restore the restaurant's reputation. What happens next as the owner begins to rebuild his dream? How do the hardworking staff rise to the occasion? And what lessons does this journey leave behind? Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. The next step was as difficult as it was necessary. True to his word, the owner wasted no time addressing the root of the problem. That very afternoon, he called Lisa and Mark into his office, one at a time. Lisa was the first to walk in, her usual confidence replaced by visible unease. She sat down, her arms crossed defensively, as the owner began. "Lisa, I've seen how you interact with the staff, both in the dining area and the kitchen. While your rapport with customers is impressive, your behavior toward your colleagues is unacceptable." Lisa tried to interrupt, but the owner held up a hand. "Let me finish. This isn't about one or two bad days. This is about a pattern of disrespect that has damaged the morale of the entire team. I can't allow it to continue." Her face flushed with indignation. "But I'm one of your best servers. Customers love me," she protested. "And that's why this is so disappointing," the owner replied, his tone steady. "You had the potential to be a leader here, but leadership isn't just about doing your job well. It's about lifting others up, not tearing them down." "I'm sorry, Lisa, but this is your last day." Lisa stormed out, muttering under her breath, but the owner didn't waver. Next up was Mark. Mark entered with an air of defiance, clearly ready to defend himself. "Let me guess," he said with a smirk. "This is about the dishwasher thing, right?" The owner nodded, partly, "but it's about more than that. As the kitchen manager, you set the tone for the entire back of house, and what I've seen is a culture of fear and negativity under your leadership." Mark leaned back in his chair, scoffing. "It's a tough kitchen. If they can't handle it, that's on them." The owner shook his head. "No, Mark, it's on you. Tough doesn't mean cruel. It doesn't mean belittling people or creating a hostile environment. I need someone who can lead with respect and integrity, and it's clear that's not you." Mark's smirk disappeared as the reality of the situation sank in. "You're firing me?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Yes," the owner said firmly. "Today will be your last shift." With Lisa and Mark gone, the restaurant felt lighter, almost immediately. The remaining staff seemed relieved, their smiles genuine for the first time in weeks. But the owner knew this was only the beginning. Firing the toxic employees was a crucial step, but it wasn't enough to heal the damage they had caused. The real work lay ahead: rebuilding trust, fostering teamwork, and creating a workplace where everyone felt valued. And for that, he needed to focus on the people who had always been the backbone of the restaurant, the hard-working employees who had weathered the storm. How would the team come together to rebuild? And what changes would the owner implement to ensure this never happened again? The answers were just around the corner. Stay tuned, because the transformation is about to begin. With the toxic employees gone, the owner turned his attention to the people who had stuck by the restaurant through thick and thin. He called for a meeting with the remaining staff, gathering them in the dining area after the lunch rush. This time, the atmosphere was different, lighter, but also uncertain. The owner began with a smile. First, I want to thank all of you for your hard work and patience. I know the last few weeks and maybe even months haven't been easy, but starting today, we're going to rebuild this team together. Carlos, still hesitant to speak up, finally raised his hand. Does this mean things are really going to change? He asked, his voice cautious but hopeful. Yes, Carlos, the owner replied, looking directly at him. It means change in every way. We're not just getting rid of the negativity. We're creating an environment where everyone feels respected and appreciated. To prove it, the owner announced a series of immediate changes. First, he implemented a new reward system. Hard work and teamwork would be recognized regularly with bonuses, paid time off, and public acknowledgement during team meetings. No more invisible efforts, he said. If you're putting in the work, everyone will know it. Next, he addressed the hierarchy. The role of kitchen manager would now go to someone who led with empathy and fairness. Turning to Mia, he said, Mia, you've shown time and again that you're a team player and a natural leader. I'd like you to take on this role, if you're willing. Mia's eyes widened in surprise. Me? Really? Yes, the owner said with a nod. You've earned it, and I trust you to help us build the kind of kitchen culture we've been missing. The room broke into applause as Mia accepted the role, her cheeks flushed with gratitude. But the changes didn't stop there. The owner also introduced regular team-building activities, open-door policies for feedback, and anonymous surveys to ensure everyone's voice could be heard. If something isn't working, he said, I want to know about it. No one should feel afraid to speak up. The meeting ended on a high note, with the staff feeling a renewed sense of hope and purpose. Carlos approached the owner afterward, a rare smile on his face. Thank you, he said quietly, for listening. For caring. The owner nodded, his heart full. Thank you for sticking with us, Carlos. This place wouldn't be the same without you. That evening, the restaurant buzzed with a different kind of energy. The staff worked together seamlessly, helping one another without hesitation. Mia stepped into her new role with confidence, and Carlos finally seemed to relax, knowing his efforts were appreciated. For the first time in a long time, the restaurant felt like a family again. But the journey wasn't over. The next challenge would be maintaining this new culture and proving that these changes were more than just words. Would the new systems work? And how would the restaurant evolve as the team grew stronger? Stay with us to see how this transformation takes shape, one step at a time. With the team on the mend, the owner turned his focus outward to the customers. After all, the restaurant's reputation had taken a hit during the period of chaos and negativity. It was time to remind the community why they had loved this place in the first place. The first step was addressing the feedback. The owner combed through online reviews and customer comment cards, paying special attention to complaints. Slow service, cold food, and unfriendly staff had been recurring themes. We can't just fix things behind the scenes, he told the team during a meeting. We need to show our customers that we've changed and that we're listening. To start, the owner introduced a new customer service training program for the staff. Led by Mia, the training focused on empathy, active listening, and going the extra mile to ensure diners felt welcome. It's not just about serving food, Mia explained during the first session. It's about creating an experience. Every smile, every kind word, it matters. Next came a special promotion to bring customers back through the doors. The owner launched a welcome back campaign, offering discounts, free appetizers, and even handwritten thank you notes for loyal patrons. Let's give them a reason to fall in love with us all over again, he said, rolling up his sleeves to help hand out flyers and post updates on social media. The changes were immediate. Customers began noticing the difference as soon as they walked in. Servers greeted them warmly, food arrived hot and on time, and the atmosphere felt more vibrant. Even small touches, like Carlos's spotless dishware and the kitchen's beautifully plated meals, didn't go unnoticed. One evening, a regular customer stopped the owner on his way out. I don't know what you've done, she said, smiling, but this place feels different in a good way. Keep it up. The turning point came when a particularly scathing online reviewer returned for a second chance. The owner recognized him the moment he walked in and made a point to personally welcome him. Throughout the meal, the staff went above and beyond to ensure his experience was flawless. By the end of the evening, the reviewer approached the counter, a grin replacing the scowl from his last visit. "You've really turned things around," he said. "I'll be updating my review tonight." The owner shared the moment with the team during the next meeting. "This is what happens when we work together," he said. "We're not just fixing mistakes, we're building something better." Week by week, the restaurant regained its footing. Old customers returned, new ones walked through the doors, and the positive reviews started to outweigh the negative ones. The staff's hard work was paying off, and it was clear to everyone that the restaurant's future was bright. But the owner wasn't ready to rest just yet. The next step was ensuring that these changes lasted. Could the team maintain their momentum? And what new goals would they set for the future? Stay tuned as the story continues to unfold. Turning the restaurant around was a monumental achievement, but the owner knew that lasting success depended on more than a few weeks of effort. It was time to embed these changes into the foundation of the business, ensuring the culture they had worked so hard to create would stand the test of time. The first step was to establish clear values guiding principles that every team member could embrace. During a special meeting, the owner invited the staff to participate in creating these values. "This isn't just my vision," he said. "It's ours. What kind of workplace do we want to build together?" Ideas poured in: respect, teamwork, kindness, accountability, and passion for quality. By the end of the session, they had crafted a set of core values that everyone agreed on. The owner had them framed and displayed prominently in the staff area as a daily reminder of their shared commitment. Next, the owner revamped the hiring process. He made it clear that skills were important, but attitude and alignment with the restaurant's values were non-negotiable. "We're building a team, not just filling positions," he explained to Mia, who now played a key role in onboarding new hires. Regular team check-ins became a staple of the new culture. Once a month, the staff gathered to celebrate wins, address challenges, and share ideas. These meetings weren't just about logistics, they were about building trust and fostering open communication. The owner also introduced a mentorship program. Experienced employees like Mia and Carlos were paired with newer staff to guide them and share their knowledge. "It's not just about teaching skills," Carlos said during one session. "It's about showing them what it means to care about this place." Another critical change was empowering the team to speak up. Anonymous suggestion boxes and one-on-one feedback sessions gave every employee a voice. If something isn't working, the owner told them, "I want to know. Your input matters, and together, we'll find solutions." As weeks turned into months, the transformation became evident. The restaurant wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Customers noticed the consistency in service and the warmth of the staff. Employees felt valued and motivated, and the team dynamic grew stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, as the owner watched the bustling dining room, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The laughter of the staff, the smiles on customers' faces, the harmony in the kitchen, it was everything he had envisioned when he first opened the restaurant. But he also knew there was always room to grow. "We've come a long way," he told the team during a meeting, "but this is just the beginning. Let's keep pushing ourselves to be better, for each other and for our customers." Would the restaurant continue to thrive in the years to come? And what new challenges and opportunities would the team face? The story of this transformation was coming to a close, but its legacy was only just beginning. One final chapter remained where the lessons learned would be tied together into a powerful conclusion. Stay tuned for the final segment. As the months passed, the restaurant not only regained its former glory, but it also reached new heights. Word spread about the transformation, and the business flourished. The hardworking staff, now a well-oiled machine, had become the heart and soul of the place, each person contributing to the positive atmosphere that customers could feel the moment they walked in. The owner looked back on the journey, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had started this venture with a dream, but it was the team, the people who believed in the vision and worked tirelessly to turn it around, who had made it a reality. Together, they had rebuilt not just a restaurant, but a culture. But the owner also knew that growth never stopped. As the restaurant expanded its offerings, launched new promotions, and built a stronger online presence, they kept their core values front and center. Respect, teamwork, and customer care weren't just buzzwords, they were the foundation of everything they did. With the new momentum, the owner could finally step back and focus on the future. He knew the restaurant was in capable hands. Mio, Carlos, and the rest of the team had proven that with the right environment, anyone could rise to the occasion. Before wrapping up, the owner wanted to share one last message with the viewers. Thank you for following our journey. This story is about more than just turning a business around, it's about the power of change, respect, and teamwork. If you've been inspired by what you've seen, remember, every great success starts with a single step. So don't be afraid to make a change, take action, and never give up on what you believe in. The owner smiled and nodded to the camera. If you've enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us, and we've got even more incredible stories coming your way. Thanks for being part of our journey. As the screen faded to black, the restaurant continued to hum with energy, a true testament to the power of transformation, teamwork, and the belief that every challenge is an opportunity for growth. And so, the story of the restaurant, its struggles, its triumphs, and its rebirth came to a close, but the lessons learned would continue to inspire both the team and their customers for years to come.